Hey guys, I'm glad you're here. Today's project is this old MacCulloch chainsaw. This was a free saw that was left on the curb, posted on Craigslist. Let's take a look at the engine and see if we can get this vintage saw running. This is another example of a huge, almost all metal chainsaw from decades ago. I made a video about a vintage chainsaw before, and I found it to be in great working shape, at least when it came to the engine. Could this be the same situation? Honestly, even if I can't get this saw running, it still looks impressive, and it needs to be proudly displayed on a garage shelf next to some trophies. First, we need to check out some of its basic functions, like if the throttle lever works, the decompression valve is still functioning, the manual oiler, and of course the choke lever. Unfortunately, this saw isn't completely original. At some point, someone replaced the bar with a Poulan bar. This could be a bad sign, as it could mean that the bar was worn out, and it could indicate that the engine might be as well. The first thing we need to do is check the compression. What I usually do is slowly pull on the rope so I can feel the engine fighting back on each compression stroke. It looks like we have plenty of compression. This is, however, with the decompression valve open. Let's close the valve and see how much more compression we actually get. Now it's really tough to pull the rope, so there should be more than enough compression to actually start this engine. Let's get some gas into the carburetor and try to get this saw running. And after removing the air filter cover, we can see this strange air filter. It's just a mesh style filter with a brown felt material. I've never seen anything like it before. At least it's in one piece. The carburetor inlet is covered by this plate, so we'll have to try and get some gas past the plate and into the engine. If we need to, we'll remove the bolts to get to the inlet. And if you didn't figure it out, it's a really cold day today. It's several degrees below freezing, and that may be a bad thing as the recoil is beginning to stick. And so, unfortunately, it didn't start, which is what I didn't want to hear. Because it didn't start, we're going to check for spark using an inexpensive inline spark checker. Make sure that the kill switch is in the on position and that the checker is properly connected to the spark plug. So what we know is that we definitely have spark and that the engine compression is more than enough to run. We likely have an issue with the gas not getting into the carb inlet. Let's take off the top cover over the carburetor and then put gas straight into the inlet and try starting it again. I'm going to put a fair amount of gas into the inlet to ensure there's more than enough to get this thing started. So unfortunately it did not start. Let's remove the spark tester and the spark plug so we can install a compression tester into the engine. We need to get an actual reading of the compression because it may not be enough to get it running. When we take out the spark plug, we can see that it's wet with gas, so it may have been flooded to begin with, and that's why it didn't start. And for the first couple of pulls, I'm going to leave the decompression valve in the out position. That way we get the maximum reading from the engine. And with the decompression valve in the out position, we get a maximum reading of 75 psi. It's kind of strange because it felt more like 90 when slow pulling the rope. And with the decompression valve pushed in, we get a reading of about 60 psi, which is right on the edge of being able to run. However, we were trying to start it with the valve in the out position, so it should have enough compression to actually start. Let's replace the spark plug and try a different method to start the engine. I'm going to use starting fluid to get it running, as it's a little bit more volatile than gas. I know some of you are out there saying you shouldn't use it since it's a 2-cycle engine and it needs oil lubrication. But if it's already damaged, then it won't matter if I damage it more with starter fluid. Well, luckily it started, and it ran for about a second. So let's try using 2-cycle gas in the throat of the carburetor and try it again. Now that we know that it runs, let's get the carburetor out and take a good look at it and see if it's in working condition. I've never seen this style of carburetor before, so I'm not sure if I have any of the parts I need to get it working again. I usually carry the parts for the more common carburetors, but this one is not a typical carburetor. It's a little tough getting the linkages off of the carburetor. There's a tie bar that ties the throttle linkage and the choke linkage together. After quite a struggle getting the carburetor out, we can now take it apart finally. Let's take apart the pump side first. And after removing the plate for the pump side, I can see the diaphragms are not your typical diaphragm setup for the pump side. This is really different from what I'm used to seeing. If we remove the light brown diaphragm, we can see a spacer and yet another diaphragm with the check valve flaps and the pumping membrane as well. They seem to be in good shape, but it's certainly really different. At least the flaps look fine on here, but like I said, I'm not really sure about this style because I've never seen it before. Let's put this side of the carburetor back together and check out the opposite side, which is the metering side. Okay, this side is much more typical. However, the diaphragm is very large and made from a different type of material than I'm used to. Well, it's definitely not petrified, but it's far from a working condition. It's going to need to be replaced. Alright, I've seen enough of this carburetor. It goes without saying that this carb will need a full rebuild kit, and the prospects of finding one online is going to be tough. The best I can hope for is finding someone who can make me the metering diaphragm using a more modern material, but it looks like this saw won't be running anytime soon. What would you guys do in this position? Would you find the rebuild kit at some ridiculously high price, or replace it with a more current style carburetor, or would you just leave it alone as is? I'd really appreciate your thoughts on this one. Thank you very much for your time. I wish we could have gotten this thing running. Hopefully in the next video we'll have better luck. I'll see you next time.